So Alexandra has the pleasure, and I think she might be very nervous about this. She has the honor of starting our presentations for today. As we begin, I would like to remind all of our finalists of some of the things that we talked about in your training for the presentations. Take a few deep breaths before you begin and lower your shoulders, sit up straight, take a breath. If you feel really nervous with your voice, you'll remember what I recommended you to do is sometimes to laugh, even if there's nothing to laugh about. So you see right there, I just laughed a little. It makes you feel a little bit less nervous. So Alexandra, I invite you to begin your presentation whenever you are ready. Now, Alexandra, we do not have sound. Just pause for a moment. Once again, we are live, so we will just take a moment to do our best. Alexandra, can you unmute yourself?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Oh, that's great. And not to worry, everyone makes that little mistake at least once in their life, usually more. So once again, take a deep breath, smile, and it's your turn. You may begin whenever you're ready.
We've all heard of and perhaps even experienced the effects of global warming, but it's a term so commonly used that to many, it's lost its meaning. We're all aware of this threat, but we don't necessarily understand it. And without recognizing what causes it, as well as how exactly it works, we cannot defeat it. I'd like to thank today's judges and the Global Youth Challenge for this amazing opportunity to share my voice. I am Alexandra Ma, a 9th grade student from Ontario, Canada, and like you, I have goals and aspirations, but at the same time, I see climate change as a critical issue and believe that there's no point in dreaming with a future so uncertain. We need to begin caring for the climate as we would anything valuable or cherished. Let's start by defining global warming, because there's more to it than the name. Two of the Earth's many atmospheric layers are currently at odds. The troposphere is warming, and directly above it, the stratosphere is cooling. This leads to the accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, namely methane and carbon dioxide, among others. This gradually raises the Earth's average temperature, which in turn warms the oceans and causes water to evaporate, hence the powerful and deadly storms and winds we so often see on TV. So now we know how global warming works, but what causes it? The most significant problem is carbon. Reducing our individual emissions seems like a good fix, but isn't nearly enough without the cooperation of large corporations like manufacturers and agricultural companies. Some claim that reducing emissions will bring our economy to its knees, but there's a middle ground between losing our planet and shutting off our economy to save it. Corporations can adopt sustainable production and supply chain practices, while planting trees that trap carbon and reduce its atmospheric presence. After all, they need a functioning planet just as much as we do. We now know what climate change is, as well as who and what are to blame for it, but what can we start doing today to address it? The obvious first step is to take individual action to reduce our carbon footprint, and there are many ways to do so. You and I may be willing to take these steps, but what about others? We need to spread awareness and hold each other accountable. While social media is a great tool for widespread messaging, sometimes an honest conversation between friends and between them and their friends is enough to get others on board. Let's spread the word and perhaps make environmental advocacy a trend of its own. We need to be more proactive in defending against climate change, which is something we can only do in numbers. Those around you may not yet understand the value of being proactive, but we shouldn't be waiting for an uncontrollable ecological catastrophe to make its debut. After all, as Benjamin Franklin once said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and for us, that ounce is a minuscule decrease in temperature to avoid the irreversible deterioration of our beloved environment. By all means, this is a battle worth fighting. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. At this time, I would ask that Professor Liette Vasseur please ask your question for Alexandra.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the good presentation. First question, you talk about carbon. Is it the only gas that is important in climate change?
It certainly isn't the only gas, as there's numerous gases, like even water vapor is one gas that contributes to it, but because of its ubiquitous presence, it's not like the most major gas in the atmosphere. There's also nitrous oxide and methane that I talked about, and those emissions can be reduced by coupling our efforts with carbon.
That's good, thank you. My other question is, in your text, you also talk about planting trees, which is something that even the federal government is trying to do. How long do you think it takes for a tree to start really absorbing carbon? Have you looked at that?
I have looked at that a little bit. It does take some time for the tree to start absorbing carbon because it needs to reach a certain maturity before doing so, but I still think it's worthwhile to start planting trees now.
Oh, perfect, perfect. Yeah, it takes around 23 years in Canada because of our cold climate, but it's true. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vasseur, for your questions. George Vanderkuur, please ask your question.
Okay. Hi, Alexandra. The question I have, in your opinion, is there one factor, what would be the most important factor in that causes climate change that we would have some control over?
So I did discuss this a little bit in my presentation, that our emissions is the most important factor that we also do have some control over. So we can reduce our emissions on many levels, like individually. There's many ways to individually reduce our emissions. I know that some people say that meat is like a huge factor because its farming produces a lot of emissions, and we don't have to entirely cut meat out of our diet. We can just eat less meat because after all, we do need protein. And on another level, on governmental levels, they can institute the law that requires like corporations to adopt more sustainable practices and supply chain practices. And I guess on the global level, we can sort of convince others to take action as well through social media and other means.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra.